Welcome to From Embers to Excellence, a podcast that explores the many facets of leadership from the perspectives of some amazing people. We discuss the triumphs and failures that have shaped our lives and our leadership philosophies. It isn't whether we fail that defines us, but when we do fail, how do we respond? Leaders dust off the ashes and use their failures as fuel to work harder and as lessons to come back wiser and stronger, more resilient, more determined, and more committed to excellence. And now, here is your host, Dave Hollenbach.
Today, I'm talking with Derek Alligood, a 30-year veteran of Orange County Fire Rescue. He spent 12 years as a firefighter, 5 as an engineer, driver-operator, and then 13 as a lieutenant.
Yeah, that's correct.
Most of your time was spent at 81 and 83, two pretty busy houses.
Yeah, correct.
The reason that I wanted to have you on was to talk about leadership, talk about lessons learned, maybe some of the experiences that you've had in your career that kind of shaped who you are, and then even some of your experiences growing up, because I know just from talking to you throughout the years, a lot of what shaped you was your relationship with your father, your experience with sports. The really big thing when people talk about you, even people that you probably don't even know, how you influence them when teaching the leadership course, and then just by example, how people saw you operate on calls, high stress incidents. You know, you have quite the reputation, and I want to say thank you for allowing me to interview you. But let's go into maybe what got you started in the fire service.
So I went on to play college football at Austin Peay State University. Came home, I was dating my wife, who's still my wife at the time. Came home, continued to go to college, not really sure what I wanted to do. My dad was a blue-collar guy, truck driver his whole life, 7th grade education. My mom worked for Sears and Roebuck for 29 years. So I wasn't really sure. I thought I was going to do the trucking thing. And before I went on to go to college, I was to play football. I was going in the Air Force because that's where my grandfather, another strong influence in my life. He was in the Air Force for 32 years, retired out. And so that was kind of what was driving me that direction. But then, of course, football gave me another avenue. When that ended, came home and really didn't know what I wanted to do. But my wife's side of the family were all involved in the fire service. So I'm going to tell this story, and you can edit it if you need to. But in 1986, I came home and I tried to get on with Orange County Fire Rescue. I took the civil service test that they gave at the time. I got a 96 on the written. I moved on to the practical. I showed up. There were 72 people that day that showed up for that physical agility test. People from all over the country had flown in. Here I was, just a guy who never really knew much about the fire service, and so I went through the agility test. I did the whole physical agility test, and at the end of the day, they were going to post all the findings, or the findings, I should say, all the scores on the tower under your Social Security number. It was a ranked list. They told you that where you were on that list is where you finished for the whole process. So I finished second out of 72 people. Never been in the fire service a day in my life. Just some practical skills and whatnot. At the end, when everybody reviewed their scores, we came back together, and this was about the time affirmative action had taken place in America. A bigger chief, and I don't remember his name, he came out and he congratulated everybody and said everybody had passed the physical agility test, that he wanted to make sure that we knew that it was a ranked list and whatnot. But there was a but. And the but was that since we were in this affirmative action situation, any minorities, anybody classified as a minority, as long as they passed, would supersede that ranked list. You know, need to behold, I didn't get hired in 1986. Very disgruntled with it. I just thought, this process is, I don't want nothing to do with this fire department. young, didn't understand at the time what was actually being told to me. So life kind of drove me a different way, and I did start driving trucks for a living and whatnot. And here and there, I was asked to leave the job because I was showing too much of a leadership role, and I didn't want to take on a management position. Just wasn't something I thought I was going to do the rest of my life. So they gave me 8 week severance. I left. I was actually coaching, who was the commander at the time in Orange County. I was coaching one of his sons in football, and he approached me about it. And I said, man, you know what? I don't know what to do with that fire department. You know, I just feel like I really got kicked to the curb, you know, for being who I was. And, you know, you take it for how you want to. But so for whatever reason, you know, that direction kept kind of coming back to me. So I went on to standards. I went on to EMT. I was 2 weeks out of finishing EMT when they called me from the county to offer me the job. I explained to the HR guy, I said, look, man, here's the deal. I'm not done with my EMT, but I had carried like a 96 in my class, and I could get reference letters and whatever you needed. Then I explained my situation in 1986. He thought about it. He said, well, you know, they really are looking for people that are already qualified or certified. And I said, man, you can't do this to me again. I said, you know, I've done all I could do. You know, I'm telling you. So basically, lo and behold, to him, he said, you know what, I'm going to process you. Just come on in. So I got the job in 1989. And then I actually took my state test, or national, whatever they call it. I actually took that test a month and a half after being on, which wasn't the norm.
Yeah.
You know, so I was kind of, I started at Station 20 up in Zellwood, and there was this thing called Boudadine up there, and it was different, different than the fire service today, I can tell you. But you kind of earned your right up there, and your rite of passage, I guess. So I caught a little bit for not actually being certified when I came on, and how did I get in, and yada yada yada. So from that point on, that's how I became a fireman. And again, I know you mentioned my mom and dad earlier, my family, how important they are to me. All the values, all my values that I got from them, the moral character I got from them, the way I was brought up, you know, in a disciplined household. My dad was almost 40 years in the Teamsters, so I always lived in a union household. He was a steward. He went up to the national conventions a few times. He was very well renowned in that field for what he did, again, with a 7th grade education. So I was always driven, you know, sports oriented. I was always that kid that my dad was saying, you know, when they asked for somebody to do it, you know, you volunteer, you get in the front of the line, whether you knew how to do it or you didn't. And there was many times I didn't, but I always volunteered. And that's kind of what drove me to really just, you know, not just stand around, to make an effort, no matter what it was. It didn't matter what rank I was. So that's kind of my background anyway. But the fire service was basically kind of geared from my wife's side of the family. Both of them were lieutenants with, one was a battalion chief, one was a lieutenant with Orange County as well. One passed away on duty, or died in the line of duty, and the other one was asked to leave after 24 and a half years due to the revamping of the county. And one of my 12 chiefs that I had, that was the way they chose to do it. So anyway, that's it. Nothing crazy.
So you mentioned Boudadine. You know, I never experienced that, but the legend was well known when I got hired. Heard a lot of stories.
They were all true.
Yeah, I'd like to hear it from somebody that actually experienced it.
So as I know it, Boudadine came to exist from a couple guys, and I'm not going to say their names, but a couple guys that it came from pro wrestling. Okay. You know, and you know how real that is. So Kevin Sullivan was a pro wrestler, and he was kind of controlled by this power called Boudadine. And Boudadine was liable to do anything. And Boudadine did a lot of things. I guess they call it hazing today. Back then it wasn't, I don't really know enough about hazing, but I had already been to college, so I already went through my freshman deal. I already, you know, I got hazed in college as most people do in your first year. So I just kind of took it as, you know, this is part of earning your right into the fold, you know, to becoming that strong-minded fireman. And of all the things that was done to all those that experienced the Garden of Memories and the wheelchair and and all that stuff that went with it. I can tell you that after 30 years of service and some hard times in my life, as far as just dealing with the service, especially early on, it made me mentally stronger. It prepared me for what I was gonna face. And I know some people look down on it, but to be honest with you, I think it was a positive for me at the time. I just went with it. I wasn't a guy that fought it. I knew it had to happen, so it happened. And I don't really need to go into, because I don't know what the statute of limitations is, so I don't really need to go into what all occurred. But it was all to make you better. I'll say that.
Man, that's disappointing. I wanted to hear one of these Buddha Dean
Yeah,
stories.
no, I don't, because I don't know where this is going to go. So I'm gonna plead the fifth on this one.
All right, all right. You mentioned mental toughness and just how that kind of prepared you for some of the things that you faced in your career. I know you've probably, over 30 years, you've seen a lot. What's one call or experience as a firefighter, fire officer, that really shaped you, that stays with you?
Oh man, there's a lot. My career was kind of in stages. So I did 12 years as a fireman, and I will say on that, 12 years as a fireman is such an advantage to where the fire service is today, because I stayed in the trenches for 12 years, and I faced a lot of stuff and learned a lot of stuff that I could carry with me as I started to progress through my career. I know it's a fast pace, get promoted as quick as you can type fire service today. And I could tell you, I wouldn't have been the driver or operator, and I wouldn't have been the lieutenant, the instructor, the mentor, as people have told me, had it not been for serving 12 years as a fireman. Because I learned so many different ways. I experienced so many different things. I'll tell you a little bit about earlier. I talked about mental, right? So there's mental toughness in a couple different ways. Being a father of three, that's a mental toughness in itself. Having to be the one that kind of guides those three kids through life and keep them out of trouble. That's a different type of mental toughness. When you get in the fire service, it's all easy to handle when it's on the TV screen and it goes off in 2 hours and you walk down and say, man, that was a crazy movie, or that was different from when I used to speak at family days to new hires and their families and explain to them that, your child's not going to be able to walk away from that movie anymore. Your child's going to experience some of the most horrific things that anybody could possibly ever see, whether it be by, just natural causes, whether it be by an accident, in a car accident, or whether it just be by heinous action, whether it be suicide, whether it be murder, whether it be rape, whatever the case may be. They're going to face that, and you're not ever you can store it away, as we try to do it all the time. We just store it away, and sorry about that phone, but it's a spam call. We try to put it away, but there's stuff that just always comes back. So early in my career, I'd been at 20, was kind of out in the country, and not a real busy load by any means. The only reason I drove 40 miles to work was because I enjoyed the environment. Even with Buddha Dean, it was still a good environment. I enjoyed the guys I worked with. But the one thing that I hadn't experienced that a lot of my classmates had experienced was a lot of trauma. Just hadn't happened yet. I've been on a month and a half and just didn't have that big call. Wasn't at the 42. I wasn't at the 30 or the 81. I was at a slower station. So I experienced suicide in my life. I lost my grandparents to murder suicide. They called it. They both, it was consensual on both sides, but these were mentors in my life. These were people that meant so much to me, that shaped me, along with my parents. And it was a tragedy. And I never would accept it. I had so much hate in my heart for them, for people that meant so much to me, to just turn around and forget all the good. Like I just did not want to. I just didn't want to condone it, and I don't condone it. But I was a little short-sighted, so I pushed it away for a long time. So my first trauma call was, I was 23 years old. It was a black gentleman who had shot himself, and they brought him to the station. 11:30 at night, came blowing the horn. Go out there, man, have no idea what we're getting into, and hear this kid with a gunshot wound to the head. He's 23 years old. I was 23 years old. We worked them back then. There was no calling it on scene. It was, you work them to the hospital. So I did. So, as most young firemen do. And as I got older, and I used to tell them, they go, man, I want a good call. I said, well, what is a good call? Tell me what a good call is. Because a good call in the fire service is somebody's worst nightmare. It's tragedy. But I understood what they were saying, but because of the way it happened to me, I put it in perspective. I'm holding C-spine. We're working CPR on this kid. My hands are all in the mess. And, I get back and, man, I'm notching one on my belt. I finally got that trauma call. I mean, I thought this was it, man. I get to finally tell somebody. We didn't have computers, by the way. Didn't have cell phones. So it wasn't like I could just go on and, send a text or tell everybody, hey, I incurred one. So I went to bed that night. I was kind of amped up. You know how the adrenaline goes. Man, I'm driving home. Again, I'm 40 miles from home. I'm driving home. I'm by myself. I can remember it plain as day. I was cutting up Fairbanks Avenue at New York and Fairbanks. And, man, I went flush. I started having no feelings. I don't know what it was, man. It came over me, and I was just didn't know how to deal with it. So I went home. I tried to fight it for a couple of days. I couldn't sleep. I was a hot mess. Talking to my wife, who understand the tragedy that I went through. Obviously, we were married, when it occurred to me in my life, and now this is my first big trauma call. And I have told this story before, just not to too many people. And it's not that I'm ashamed of it. I'm to be honest with you, I'm proud of it because it really made me who I was. Again, a tragedy in your life, I turned it into helping others. But I went to work, man, and again, you got to know the Buddha Dean thing. You got to know the air with which I was hired. It wasn't a whole lot about talking and counseling. There was no, you went to work, man, and you just put your tough skin on and you did it. And, man, about midday, I was done. I couldn't do it. I went in and talked to my first lieutenant, Marvin Barrett, who was a godsend. And I told him what was going on, what I was feeling. And he sent me home, which I don't know was the greatest thing at the time, but at the time it felt like the best thing. I laid out of work for like five weeks with the intent I wasn't going back. I said, I can't do this. I just can't. This isn't for me. I'd already actually called a couple of people trying to line up maybe a job here or there. And so I sat down with my dad again, best man in my wedding, best man in my life. And I told him, I said, Dad, I think I'm going to leave. And he said, well, son, let me tell you something. He said, if you leave for every hard situation in life that comes up, you're going to leave a lot. I said, yeah, but Dad, you don't understand. He says, no, I do understand. And he says, but you can't leave without going back. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, you got to go back. He said, you put a year and a half of your life into getting this job. And now you're talking about leaving this job. And so I thought about it and I said, I got to go back. So I returned on October 31st. It was Halloween. Nervous, man, anxiety. I had it all going on, boy. Anyway, I go to work and there was a couple of days where a couple of times throughout the day, something was funny, something, and I kind of, I was kind of like, man, I just love it. I just love the environment. And even in my mind, my mind was telling me, hey, quit. My heart was telling me, man, you're doing what you need to do. But it's hard, when you're dealing with that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm thinking Halloween night in Zellwood. Holy cow, man. I'm fixing to it's going to be mayhem, Well, we didn't get a call. We passed out candy. Everybody went to bed. There was a couple of late nighters who stayed up till 1 a.m. I'm still up at 3:30 in the morning. Now I've only been on for 2 months, and I'm cleaning the kitchen for like the 10th time of the day. It was already cleaned, but I'm just in there cleaning. And Marvin, my first lieutenant, again, I say he's a godsend. He never got up. We called him the big bear when he went to bed. I always had to sleep next to him because snoring didn't bother me. And I don't even really think he qualified as snoring. It was something above that. But I could sleep there. So I always sat next to him, and he never got up. So when he went to bed, he got up when it was time to get up in the morning, and it's shift change. So this night at, it's 3:30 in the morning. I'm up. I'm tense. I'm thinking to myself, I ain't gonna be able to do it. I think I even called my dad earlier in the day. Said, Dad, I just can't do it. He said, well, son, he said, you tell them that you're going to move on and you thank them for the opportunity and, the whole 9 yards. And I'm not sure what he said, but something caught me right at the end of the conversation. I told him I loved him, as I always do. And something caught me at the end of the conversation that said, I think he was just kind of telling you, hang in there, don't tell him to quit. But if you're going to tell him you're quitting. So I did. And lo and behold, 3:30 in the morning, the big bear got up, shows up in the kitchen. John was a big thing back then. Everybody was called John. He come in there and he said, well, John, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just, man, I can't sleep. I'm really anxious, just waiting on that next suicide, man. I'm just waiting on that next trauma call. And he said, well, make us some coffee, John. So made us some coffee, and we sat down and we talked till shift change, just him and I in the kitchen at 20. And he put life in perspective for me. He told me when he was new, he told me some of the guys I worked with when they were new and the troubles that they went through on their first, big calls. And unbeknownst to me, everybody has a way of dealing with it. Depends on what your life experience was up to it. Man, from that day forward, I just fought it. I fought it and I fought it and I got through it and made me stronger. And I was able to help a lot of people in my career. So when people would mock suicide, people would talk about weakness, and people would say stuff, I was the first to step up. I would never tell them what my deal was, but I was the first one to step up and say, hey, until you've been there, until you've encountered it, you don't know anything about it. And I would somewhat get a message across, not ever telling my story, but people knew certain times it was not the right person to be talking to. And it worked out for me, man. It shaped me. Talking about things that shape you. And you and I have had some personal conversations. That's how my career started. And then I just kept pushing forward. And of course, I moved on to 2 busy houses, and I stayed there the rest of my career, another 25 years. I taught a lot. I never envisioned that I would be thought upon as I was thought upon, because I never had to change who I was. I never had to run any position I was in any different than when I was a fireman, other than what was, SOP. Outside of that, though, I treated people the same for my all 30 years. And man, next thing you know, people were like, man, you're my mentor, or you touched me in this way, or you touched me in that way. And I'm like, I don't even remember working with you. I mean, really, you know how it is. We got so big, and I taught all of them, but it's hard to remember names.
Yeah.
And really just really kind of humbled me. I taught Back to Basics, which is a program that, they would pick 6 lieutenants out of the county to run this program. And you were a lieutenant at 71 at the time.
Yeah.
And I taught Battalion 5, and, they would do those reviews, and you know how most of those reviews were.
Yeah.
It was, 4, 2, 3, 1, whatever, boom, throw them in the pile. But all mine were coming back with notes and things, good things being said. And, so I was approached at training about, man, what are you doing out there? Because most of these reviews are just a, pencil whip and get out of the way. And you have comments on all your reviews. And so, man, I'm not doing anything. I'm trying to teach these people what's right, just the basics of doing a job. And from that day forward, it humbled me to know that I had that big of an impact. So I tell people it's a blessing and a curse. So it was a blessing because everybody likes to be looked upon in a positive way, but it was a curse because everything I ever did from that point forward was always thought out. It was always who was in the room, who am I addressing, because you're being looked at in a different way. And again, it's a blessing and a curse, but I think a positive overall, because it made me a better person. So anyway, might have been a little long-winded, but
no, that was awesome.
Caught me on a good day.
You've mentored a lot of people. Out of all of those firefighters that have come through your crews, can you pick out one that really is a standout that you're really proud that you were able to work with them and mentor them?
Oh man, that's a tough question. You're putting me in a bad spot. So many, talking about mentoring, directly and indirectly. There was those that worked for me, but then there was those that would call me from other stations, and would come by on their off days to maybe get some insight, pick my brain, do some training. So mentoring directly to those within the house, and there's probably 5 or 6, Dave. I really hate to single one out. I really do. I mean, you get guys that come in with some experience, whether it be fire service, because everybody comes in with experience. We taught in leadership that, the rookie was no experience, no blank slides. I mean, all blank slides, but they all have experience. If you worked in construction, if you worked in the electrical business, if you worked in the plumbing business, if you were a mechanic, man, you had a lot to give to me, because I did a lot of the construction side of it, but very weak on electrical. I did know the plumbing side, but like mechanics, how cars work, how to take them apart, the things to do, not to do. A guy coming in who's a rookie in the fire service has a lot to offer. The electrician has a lot to offer. All those those odors, those electrical, investigations or whatever. I didn't care if you had a day on or an hour on, man. If you were an electrician and you were worth your weight in gold, you were who I was going to. I think that's the beauty of the fire service. So to discount people because they didn't come in with a background, for me, I had those that came in that were completely green that turned out to be just outstanding, that were sponges. That soaked in all that knowledge. They took it from everybody. They weren't afraid to ask the questions, which is another thing that it was a pact I made with myself, that if I ever became an officer, and that I wanted my people to feel freely to talk. I wanted my people to not be intimidated to ask that question, whether it be in private or whether it be in front of the crew. But I encouraged them. I encouraged them after any significant call that they needed to ask me questions. Hey, why did we do it like that? Or was there another way to do it? And for the guys that were green, it seemed more like it seemed a greater accomplishment because they were so green and now they were thinking in a different way, versus the guy that came in maybe with just a little bit of background or more practical skill. But either way, we were able to mesh all that together and build these crews. I went through 4 crews in my last 8 years or so. I went through 4 different truck companies, from guys getting promoted, guys pushing forward. And so I was a little exhausted at the end. Like, I just wanted to come in and not have to do this, every 2 years. But in the long and short, it turned out to be a blessing for everybody. But to see that green guy start asking questions and start getting it and start understanding, to the point where now they would start asking tactically, hey, could we have done this? I was thinking maybe if we did this, and whether it was good or bad, I was able to explain it. Be like, man, that's a good idea. You know what? I'm going to put that in my memory bank, to somewhere I could explain, hey, here's why that wouldn't have worked. And I think when you get to that point, you've accomplished what it is you're setting out to accomplish, whether it is directly said to you or whether you just see it. So I really don't want to just name one, to be honest with you.
Well,
because I've had so many.
Where I was going with it, you actually gave a lot of the information that I was looking for. Like, what was it about those individuals that set them apart, their achievements? Because we've all seen really good people go to stations and just get ruined.
Yes.
And then we've seen individuals that go to a really good crew that has a good officer, good firefighters, and somebody that really probably should have chosen a different career.
Yes.
Somehow they just get shaped and molded and turn into a superstar.
Yes. I agree. I I got a few names that pop into mind, of people that, so I taught a lot of command school. I led the program for a little while there towards the end. And, when you're a lieutenant, and a lieutenant by choice, and I'll make sure I tell everybody that I was a lieutenant by choice because that's where I didn't want to stop. To be honest with you, I never wanted to get there. Again, the job kind of pushed me in that direction, and I ended up there, and I'm glad I did. But I could have went further. I was encouraged to go further. I was encouraged to take the next step. But for me, it truly come down to, I wanted to affect people. And I'm not talking about the people outside the house. I want to talk about the people that worked for the department. And unfortunately, as you know, being a battalion chief, you don't have the ability to affect as many people just due to your daily task and all that goes with it. You don't get that direct contact. Whereas staying as a line officer, staying in it, you get to touch so many more people. You get to train so much longer. So for me, it was about teaching people the job, and not that I never thought there was a job that I couldn't handle, no matter how abnormal it might be. It was kind of common sense to me, take care of those immediate needs. And then everything would kind of fall in place, and you'd fill in the gaps. So I always felt like, even if that plane went down and there was 100 people on it, I just felt like I would be able to handle that. I'm sure there's things that are going to be missed, but as long as you develop that mentality, you're going to be able to carry yourself in a positive way. I would say this to those families. I was talking about Family Day. I would say that, there's many a call I've been standing there that I wanted to leave. I wanted to get out of there. It's fight or flight. And so I would tell them, when you signed on, when your child signed on, or your loved one signed on to be a fireman, he went ahead and ixnayed flight, because there is no flight. It's stand and fight. Many, many calls, even late in my career, that I'm on that I didn't want to be there. But nobody in that area was going to know that I didn't want to be there, because I was back into the game. It's that finite focus that comes with that, with that type of call. So, I would tell the rookies, you're going to go in, you're a rookie. You're not going to go through Boudin. Boudin doesn't exist anymore. Okay. Sometimes I think they should have maybe gone through some Boudin, but he doesn't exist anymore. You're not going to go through that. But I will tell you this, the thing about being a rookie is there's things to being a rookie. There is things to earning your rite of passage. And I think we all in the fire service who have it in our blood believe that, whether it be military, whether it be fire service, whether it be the police officers, or any public service, really. You got to earn your right. You're just not going to walk in and be that guy. So there is a rite of passage. So with that rite of passage comes a calm demeanor, comes the ability to use that training, whether it was formal or informal, whether it was looking at a guy like you or looking at a guy like me, seeing how he conducted his business and saying, hey man, that looks like the right way to do it. And that slowly becomes part of what you do, to the point where you do get the mentality that there is nothing you can throw at me that I can't handle. And so when I say I was a lieutenant by choice, I was a lieutenant to get those people to that point. And I don't believe that beyond that, in the way our department was structured, you had that influence anymore. You kind of got away from it, got out of contact with it. And that's a whole nother subject. Talking about those that sometimes shouldn't be in the fire service, but somehow managed to get where they're at. That's kind of what comes to my mind. It's not the rookie coming on. Yeah. It's the ones that went beyond. But again, every department has its own, every department has its own issues. We were just bigger, we had more of them, but they're all the same. So for me, it was about influence, and it was about trying to teach people what I thought was right. And as people were starting to gravitate towards liking the way I handled business, the way I did things, the way I trained people, the way I wasn't one who hollered or screamed. I wasn't one who jumped onto people. I was one that put my arm around and said, hey man, why are you struggling? Let's talk about that. Let's figure that part out. Because once we figure that part out, then we can work on the rest of it. And I talked to a good buddy of mine who took my position. I gave him my unit, and I talked to him today about not being so quick to write people off. We're so quick to be judgmental. We're so quick to adhere to what our station does that we never look to see that there's some positives in what other stations are doing. We never want to do that. It's a pride thing. And you want to be good. You want to look down the road and know that's the guy that's coming, because his crew's going to be jammed up. That's a positive feeling, especially from a command standpoint. But there's people that we could have wrote off a long time ago that, like you said, turned out to be outstanding. That turned out to, like you can't even remember when they were, not even capable of tying their shoes. They had to get boots. So those are the kind of things I'm talking about, is that, I learned that. That's a learned trait. When I was 23, 28, I was confrontational. I was, if you didn't, all right, I'll take you on. But I learned as an adult, and learned as, growing in the service, that that's not how you affect people. I mean, you can bully anybody you want to bully. Those that want to be bullied will be bullied, and those that don't, they're going to step back at you. So that's not the way to treat people. So I always tried to find what are you struggling with? Let's approach what you're struggling with. And then beyond that point, if you could figure that part out, you usually went on to do good things. If you couldn't figure that part out, then maybe I give you the Burger King application. But I didn't have to do that. very often. So I think that that's kind of what makes you that mentor. That's what makes you proud when you see those people that people were writing off turn out to be successes and good at what they do. I'm not talking successes just because they were a step ahead or a class ahead. They earned it. And I think that's when you know that you got it. When people are doing stuff like that, you go, wow, I haven't really done anything different, but for whatever reason, it affected them in a positive way.
There's a couple of things, and we'll see where this goes. But through all of that, one of the things that kind of occurred to me really was there was a pivotal point for me personally when I was going through some stuff, and I'm sure you remember it. At the time, I was the chief of special operations.
Mm-hmm.
Really didn't have a whole lot of support from the department with as many responsibilities that went with that position. I was pretty overwhelmed with just stuff that was going on in my personal life and then everything that had to do with that position. I remember one day you came in, and we've always had a really good relationship. There wasn't one other person that came and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you, and you got a minute?" You shut the door, and you're one of the biggest smartasses I've ever met, and
You're gonna have
that's.
to, you got to define that smart and ass are together. No, I got you. Yeah. No, I'm with you.
So,
And just so you know, I remember this day distinctly.
so there's three parts to it, and we'll probably come back around to the smartass part because I'd like to know where that comes from. I think this could lead into the second point. Um, the first thing that I want to know is at that time, you recognized that I needed somebody to, I don't know, yank my head out of my ass. And
Mm-hmm.
so you took that time and you were very blunt and, I'll never forget that, because I was screwing up. I didn't have my priorities in the right place. You came in, you sat down, you let me know that I was disappointing people. You let me know that you were aware of stuff that was going on in my life, but I needed to suck it up, and if I needed to talk, you were there. I'd like to hear from your perspective, kind of what led you to do that, and maybe what was going on in your head when you decided to take that action, and how you felt after you left my office.
Well, so this is going to go back to it's going to start back to basic. You and I never really worked together. I knew about Dave Hollenbach. I knew about you when you came on and all that stuff early on. But you and I never really worked together. But teaching that back to basics and kind of getting to know all the crews and looking at the way crews functioned. We had those that I spent some extra time with, and then we had those that you just were like, man, I don't even feel like I did anything. So that's when I kind of started looking at Dave Hollenbach as just the lieutenant, as the guy that had a well-oiled machine, guys that were thirsty for training, good or bad, whether it was bad training, good training, they were going to give it their all, which was always the way I did it. Even before I had the end of training and teaching, teaching throughout the department, I always showed up to training with a good attitude. I never bitched and moaned. If it was a bad class, I never made an ass out of myself. I worked hard. I did what I had to do, got what I could out of it. Maybe on the ride back, there were some conversations about, man, that was about the lamest drill I've ever been through. Guys don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. But I never disrespected anybody that was there training, that was thinking they were doing a good job, whatever the case may be. So when I came in and I trained you guys, and I remember this, man, like it was yesterday. We're doing garden lays, and we were talking about extending hose lines and talking about getting behind these houses for the way we fought, brush fires that we don't fight actually, but we used to. We actually used to put them out in 3 days instead of 3 months, but that's a whole different philosophy. But anyway, we were talking about it, and I remember getting an email from you. I was teaching still, and I remember getting an email from you saying, "Hey, man, we used it today. Man, we went through a privacy fence. We took that panel out, and man, it was jam up. It went so well." And you were just kind of letting me, just reassuring me that, hey, man, you know what you're teaching is good stuff, man. If people apply it, and so that kind of meant a lot to me, because I knew people. I was like I said, I was getting a lot of good responses. A lot of humbling responses back from people, but to actually have somebody say, "Hey, man, we did exactly what we trained on that day, and man, it worked out like it." And I don't know if you remember the call, but
Yeah.
I just remember you sent me the email, and a lot of those people that work for you have now gone on to do really good things and are doing good things, and they've taken leadership roles and positions, and I think that's a credit to you. But for me, it was, I want to know a little more about this Dave Hollenbach guy. I kind of like the way he's doing things. I know you had a military background, and I know you were into the leadership thing and all that. And man, I'm thinking you're heading in the right direction. And then next thing I know, they said, "Hey, did you hear that Dave Hollenbach guy he's going to be the Chiefs driver?" I said, "Oh man, I had so much faith in that guy, and now he's going to go be the Chiefs driver. What's he doing?" Right. But then as you became the Chiefs driver and you were handed down some responsibilities and you started building on, building on the leadership, just bringing leadership into the department, just teaching people what leadership really is. Because, leadership was pretty much where you were stationed. And like you said, there were stations you go to, there was zero leadership, and you just thought that's the way it was supposed to be done. Only to realize that you were really, people had a lot of faith in you coming out, and then all of a sudden, man, they run into you 6 months later, and you can't tuck your shirt in, your boots are untied, you're terrible at your job, a guy you had a lot of hope for, and then you just reflect back to where they are, and you look at the officers in charge and the leadership they have at that station. So I don't think people really understand the gravity of leadership, like how it is to work with a good leader versus how it is not to. I was in a position where I was able to have both. I did work for some bad leaders, and I took it upon myself, just like I told every recruit. It's not, there ain't draft picks here. You're going to end up at a station, and you know what's right. I mean, we've taught you what's right. You see what you need to gravitate to. Use everything available to you to get to that position. Don't settle on the fact that you're with a bad crew or you got bad leadership. Gravitate to that leadership. And I've seen those that did, and then I've seen those that fell into it, the trap. But with you, I didn't see that. I saw a crew that was really bonded together, and they liked training. They were good at what they did. And so I want to know more about you. And then of course you became the Chiefs driver, and which at the time I was heavy into training and on my off days, and I said, man, I can use this guy. I can use this guy. Because he's my link to letting them know what the chatter is out here in the field, So anyway, that's where you and I started kind of, relating to each other, talking to each other. I was on a truck company, and somehow became the truck guy. I don't know how that happened either, but somehow became the guy that, man, that's the truck company you want to show up to your call, because those guys are going to work, and they're going to take care of you. So as you gravitated to the special ops side, we were more entwined because, we were considered special ops. And so you and I had a lot more interaction. And then, of course, we were teaching leadership together. So I got to know more about you. So the kind of individual I was, this comes back from my father, was, rumors are rumors, fact is fact. So as I'm hearing, because, when you became the special ops chief, you were swimming uphill, no doubt. You didn't have all those classes. Still don't think that you have to have all those classes to be a good squad leader. I think that the guys in that program, if they're doing what they need to do, and you're very organized in what you do, I don't think you have to carry every piece of paper they have to be good at what you do. And obviously, it happened with Captain Hubbard running that program for a year and a half, speaking of smart asses. But so you and I interacted a lot more. So I was able to kind of know who you were. I was able to know a little bit about your family. I even deeper into, with your brother and all that stuff, I got to know more about you. So as I'm hearing these complaints, we had come down to training, and I think I was actually just stopping by there to pick up something, or, I mean, I wasn't even there for formal training. And I told the guys, I said, hey, I'm going to go in and see if Chief Hollenbach's in there. I want to sit down and have a conversation with him. So you guys, do whatever, listen to the radio, because I probably wasn't going to be. And I just saw it. I saw it from when we went to lunch that day. I saw that you were struggling. I don't think you were struggling as much with all the duties that came with the position as much as you were with how do I put it in line with what's going on in my personal life. Because me, family's first. I mean, if something's happened, that family's got to be addressed. And I saw that it was interfering with some of what, some timely stuff that maybe wasn't getting out, and then I'm listening to the grumblings, and the one thing I don't like is grumblings for people who won't go to the source. As you know, I've never been that individual. I'm going to go to the source. I don't care if you're president of the United States. If you're going to give me the opportunity, I'm going to take the opportunity. And you call it blunt, I just call it truth, being honest. So that day, that's kind of was my reason for coming by there, was I wanted to go in there and see if maybe I could kind of figure out if there was anything I could do to help you. I don't know that I could have helped you professionally, but maybe I could have helped you, in your personal life. Maybe there was something that, might have just taken some weight off your shoulders, or whatever the case may be, but I just wanted to say, hey man, it's, you're being looked upon by many, many eyes, those under your command and those above your command. And I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to know that scuttlebutt's out there. I don't know if it was getting back to you. But I knew you were better than that. And I knew there was a way. I knew that if so, me, you call me a smart ass, and I am proudly a smart ass, but a lot of it's in humor. A lot of it is in to get people to laugh, to loosen them up, but there's always a message in there somewhere. And so for me, my thing was, if I can just get you to think about it, I've accomplished my goal, right? And that's kind of the way I dealt with people. Again, I wasn't a screamer and a hollerer. I wasn't a guy that was going to dress you down in front of people. It was going to be you and I, and I was going to gravitate into whatever that situation might be to get to the point. So that's kind of where it was on that particular day. And I remember it distinctly, was I just want to leave you food for thought, right? I want you to know that, there's people that can help you. There's people that are, it's a phone call to handle that task over there, to handle that task over there, not take all that task on dealing with a rough personal life at the time. So that was kind of my point. And so my point was kind of to snatch a knot in your ass, but not in the way most people do it. It was, I'm sure we had a couple laughs that day. I'm sure I loosened you up a little bit before I gave it to you.
Yeah, you did.
But the point was, I wanted to throw it on the table and let you chew on the crumbs and go, you know what, let me sit back and think about this. I got this squad lieutenant at 54 who will do anything for me. Why don't I pawn some of that off on him? And I say pawn in a positive way, not a negative way. That's a little bit less weight on your shoulders. So, and then you figured it out. You eventually left there, so that's a positive, as we all know. But long and short of it, that's what it was about that day. It was letting you, chew on some of those thoughts that I threw at you and leave. I wasn't looking for answers. I just wanted to get you back in the game. And I think it worked out.
Yeah. That time in my life was pretty rough. When you came and met with me, I remember feeling a little bit beat up. It really got me in gear, and I figured out what I needed to do. And really, quite frankly, I wanted to make you proud. I've looked up to you for a long time, and I didn't want to let you down.
Yeah, well, that wasn't the intent. You don't have to worry about me.
No, I know.
My big thing was to let you know I was there for you. Yeah. Good or bad, it didn't matter. I was going to be there to prop you up if that's what needed to happen. But I think at that time you needed somebody to just, feel like you weren't taking this burden on by yourself. And I know the support you you don't get, because even guys that came in after you that held that same spot, they were hammered with the same stuff. Like, why am I? This shouldn't even be on my plate, you know. And again, I think that's people who get disconnected. I think that's the people that don't really understand what goes into all the stuff that happens in that program. So I just, my biggest thing was to say, hey man, you ain't battling this by yourself. I'm here. I don't know. I may make it worse for you, but I'm here for you. And that was kind of the whole point to stopping that day, was just to let you know. And I want you to know what was being said. I'm not a guy that, I don't like that. Approach me directly, and say, hey man, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm thinking, and that's going to give me something to chew on for a while and figure out, and because, and this is something I've gotten better at. Boy, it's hard sometimes, when you're acting out of emotion, or you're acting out of kind of like that last call, that last big call I had in my career. I got so mad that a guy I loved to death. I was willing to just stomp him right in the dirt. I was really, just emotionally, I really wanted to tear his ass up.
Well, let's talk about that.
Hold on a second, though. What I'm saying is that again, as developing as an adult and throughout the fire service or whatever, I learned that, when it got to that point of emotion and saying something that you're probably going to have to take back in a couple of days, I would chew on it for a couple of days, and I would come back and I would handle it in a totally different manner. I would think it through and say, okay, there might be parts that I get of whatever occurred, but there's parts I don't get, and those are the parts I would address. But I was always willing to come back and say, hey man, I wasn't fully in the right. Like I kind of flew off the handle, or I allowed my emotions to get the best of me, and I apologize for that. But I do think there are things to be taken care of or to be addressed. So that being said, I'm just a guy that believes in going to the source, get it from the horse's mouth, as my dad used to say. Everybody can spank that horse on the ass, but nobody's willing to go up there and talk to him, so go up there and talk to that horse, find out what the hell's going on. And then maybe you get a better perspective, because people, and you got to admit, during that time you were going through all that, they were one-sided. Most of the comments were nothing to do with your personal life. It was to do with something an answer you didn't give them, or something that they wanted that didn't get done, or whatever the case may be. They didn't want to take the person as a whole. They were bitching at the position. They weren't bitching at the person. But the problem is we are all people. We talk about stress in that leadership class, right? Come to work with a little bit already, you got family stress and whatever. And now you're coming to work overloaded already with some family stress, but nobody wants to take that into effect. And so I learned to take into effect people's as a whole. I could tell when it wasn't a fire department thing bothering somebody, and everybody's entitled to a bad day. You heard me say it 1,000 times. I'll give you one bad day, but you start coming in 2 and 3 in a row, then I am going to have a conversation with you, but I don't believe you jump on it right away. I believe you chalk it up to a bad day, because we're all entitled to them. Being an officer, sometimes you don't get as many as you'd like because you got to deal with somebody else's. But the bottom line is that I think sometimes you can make somebody's bad day worse by not letting it play out. For you were having bad weeks. It was bad weeks that led into bad months, and people didn't understand. If they'd have just come to you, man, and said, hey man, I don't understand why I didn't get this response, or I asked for this 4 weeks ago or whatever, maybe then they find out that there's more going on than just pushing papers and talking to people on the phone. But most people don't want to do that, and that it's hard to step up and challenge a guy. I never really thought it was that hard, because that's the way I was brought up. So that's just the reason I did it.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that call that you're referencing, that last big call of your career,
yeah,
that was a really big call for me as well. We've had this conversation before, but you're really, really good at telling the story. I'd like to hear it from your mouth from beginning to end, because there's a lot of lessons in that story. Tactically, leadership wise, communication wise. I think everybody on that call learned something that night, you know.
I do too. I believe you're correct. So my last my last 6 months of my career, I gave up my unit, and the policy in the department that we worked for um, was that in order to give your unit up, you had to stay 6 months in each other's position. So I gave it to a well-deserving individual who was at the time a floating lieutenant. Um, so I became a floating lieutenant, which I still don't really like the policy because you spend 30 years, you figure you kind of get to dictate your last 6 months, but it didn't work that way. So I was floating all over the county. So I floated into a house there at 63 with a lot of young people, a lot of direction needed at that house. There was a lot of youth there, not a lot of strong leadership there, an open lieutenant position. As you know, you dealt with it. So again, kind of that mentality every day I went to work was, for 24 hours, there's nothing you can throw at me that I can't handle. That's got to be your mentality when you get into that position, and you're gonna be directing people, whether it be life or death, or whether it just be how things are going to run the day. You've got to be able to project that to other people so that they start building that same mindset as, hey, there's nothing they can throw at me that I can't handle. In fact, you can ask most of the guys that went and took their promotional exams that used to work for me that got promoted. I would call them the day of the test, or I'd text them, say, it's the last thing I want you to remember going into that test. There is nothing they're going to throw at you that you can't handle. That's the last thought I want them to have going in there. And you can ask them to a man, they either got that phone call or they got that text, because that's the mentality I think you just have to have. And I think the good ones have that mentality, and some flounder through, but the good ones usually show up, take care of it. So on this particular day, really busy day, a big storm had blown through. We'd already went on one building fire that was already scaled down to single unit responses because of the storms. It was a bad day. That ended up being a lightning strike. They thought it was in a big warehouse. Ended up, it hit a big pine tree right on the back side of it. And that's where the smoke was being generated from. We went through all the protocol, and we did what we had to do, and we mopped it up. So we headed back to the station, and at this house, I was probably on my 20th call of the day. And it's maybe 7:30 at night. Just one of those days. And we get busted out to it was a public assist call is how it came in. The engineer that was driving for me, he was a young guy, who needed a lot of direction. And so he busts out of the house. We're going lights and sirens. We don't get the update until we're, probably a mile down the road. And the update is that a lady called in and said that her cable box had been hit by lightning, and that she wanted us to check her cable box because she called Spectrum, and Spectrum said they'd be out the following Thursday. I believe this was a Wednesday. Can't remember exactly, but it was midweek, so it was going to be a week before they came out. So in my mind, I'm already saying, "Are you freaking kidding me? This is call 20 plus, and I'm going to look at a cable box that the cable company said will be out Thursday to look at it." So in my mind, I'm thinking, you know what? This is just kind of, everybody knows, anybody in the service knows, just kind of horseshit you're on. So we're about to where we're going, just short of the intersection. I just was fixing to tell the engineer to shut them lights off, and we were too close to the intersection. It was raining a little bit, so I thought it'd probably be best that everybody was already just starting to do what they do, either get in your way or just stop. And so I just let him go to clear the intersection, and then I was gonna have him shut the lights off. Well, as we cleared the intersection, I look over and I see fire just blowing out of the gable end of a 3-story apartment building. So I said, well, hell, I guess our cable box did catch on fire. So we roll in there, and I call a first alarm response, and then I bumped it up to a working fire, and our department was 2 more engines than another truck company. So I knew I needed 2 on it coming off a truck company. I wanted one on the gable end, and I wanted one in the middle of the building in case we did have to cut it off. So it was just a single unit on sync for the first, probably I'd say probably first 5-6 minutes for sure until the battalion chief showed up that day. I directed the crew what to do. Again, they were young. There was a little bit of bumping into each other, and and I went around and gave my report. Got fire just blowing out the gable end up in the attic space. People in the apartments that we're running on, the people in the department directly underneath where this fire is are looking out the window, kind of like gawkers do, just like, oh, hey, the fire department's out there, not knowing that, fire's completely in the attic above their head. So I tell the 2 firemen on the unit I want them to clear that building. I want to evacuate it. I said, get up them stairs and knock on them doors. And Dave, I tell you, if there was one, there was 50 people came out of that building. That's how many people were there, unbeknownst to what was going on. So I guess the check the cable box was a good thing, because I don't know how long it would have went before, we actually got the call.
Right.
So I just started, again, just falling back on experience and command presence and whatnot. I started directing units, when they came in. I didn't want them all bottlenecking down. So told the first truck company that showed up to make the first left and come all the way around to the back of the unit, and everybody else had to go down, make the second left. You're going to be coming up the opposite way, and to leave room for that second truck. So when the battalion chief got on scene, he probably didn't really need to take a whole lot of information from me, because I had pretty much described it on the radio, but there wasn't a great pass on there. But it was, hey, why don't you head up to the 3rd floor with your crew? And I said, all right. So I told him, I said, I'm pulling that entire breezeway. I want him to know that I was pulling all that ceiling in that breezeway, that we were going to find a stopping point. I want to see how far it had gotten across there. So I went up there, and I had this young kid from 66, eager. He was just a guy who wanted to work. In fact, his Lieutenant Holiday twice for working with me and not working with him. But he came over, and him and I together, we pulled that entire breezeway down, and the firewall. So it was a common attic, but the firewall was double sheeted drywall. So it was doing its thing. As I started getting more crews up, I directed an engine company to each door. The doors were on like a 45, narrow hallway. You were there, you saw it, narrow hallway. And we were breaching those doors, getting ready to make fire attack. We were going to get up underneath it, start it from the doorway and work our way out. Had a little issue with the water supply coming up, so we were delayed on water. I'm seeing this firewall hold it back, and then I start seeing the seams of that drywall with a little bit of flame licking around it. So I was on the radio with the battalion and telling them, if you don't give me some water up here, doors were breached, crews were ready, lines were in place, we just didn't have any water. And I said, if you don't give me any water up here, we're going to burn the roof off this thing. And he's trying to, somewhere in all that jargon, he's trying to tell me that they had an issue and they're trying to work the issue out. By this point, I think, is when you arrived, and he made you Division 3, which is where we were on the 3rd floor. I don't think you and I ever really had an opportunity to communicate to each other. I can remember looking back, seeing you on the breezeway. I was in the middle of the hallway, kind of directing crews on both sides. I heard the battalion chief call Division 3 and tell you to evacuate that 3rd floor landing. So in my mind, again, been doing this a long time, don't really need to evacuate this 3rd floor landing, but you know what? I don't see what he sees down there. I see what I see. I think had he had a better awareness of what had already happened up there, he'd have probably felt a little more comfortable. But seeing some footage of it or whatnot, in his mind, I think it did appear that we were standing underneath all that fire, and we really weren't. He said to clear that 3rd floor landing, and I think you did get in just to say, check or let him know you got the order. But I don't know, between me and you, it was probably less than a minute. Again, not knowing how confined it was, how many people we had up there. I heard him tell the Quint to go ahead and open up. And I was in the middle of the breezeway with firemen on both sides of me from my crew. And they opened up that deck gun, which was throwing off that aerial, which was throwing 800 gallons a minute. And they blew in that firewall on top of us in the breezeway, immediately blacking down. I mean, it forced all the smoke down. Couldn't see anybody. Couldn't even see the 2 firemen next to me. Last thing I remember was I made eye contact with you when he gave the order to clear the landing. And then immediately they opened up that They opened up that aerial nozzle, and I remember thinking, man, I'm less than a month away from retiring. I had less than a month to go, and I knew the officer on that truck company that day because he worked for me. He was my driver operator on my unit. He knew my MO. He knew how I worked and the things that needed to happen. So first happened, everything came down in on top of me. Couldn't see anything, so I did a quick inventory of myself. I still had my face piece on, and I was still there. And I was like, all right. So I reached to my right and my left, and my firemen were still there. I asked them if they were okay. They said, yeah. Again, we couldn't see anything. So I told them at that point, we're going up the back breezeway. You were in the front breezeway. We came down, and once I got to that breezeway and kind of got out of that darkness, I immediately, the emotions were super high on my part. Like, I'm going to go stomp his ass in the dirt in front of everybody, because that is not how you run a truck company. Needless to say that you could have killed, half a dozen guys up there, and we read too many of those stories, right? But a lot of the problem was communication. Too much chatter on the radio. Nobody confirming orders. People coming in with stuff that didn't need to be said. I remember you trying to get out. You couldn't even get out to them because just an abundance of at this point non-essential talk. So I remember coming down. I remember hearing you ask where Alligood was, and I remember Lieutenant Rotundi hollering from the back up to you and said, "He's right. He's with me. Him and his crew are with me." And then I think we all went down to the ground. We all went down the stairwell, and that's when I confronted the lieutenant off that truck company. And I did finally have to call and apologize to him, because I do love him to death. But man, I was hot, Dave. I mean, I could just see spending all that time, and this is how I was going to go out on poor communication and lack of clarification, especially a guy who taught command school, a guy who taught these guys that are chiefs command school. I was a little hot. I was a little hot under the collar. It took me a little while. I think it was like you said that night. The division chief that night was a guy that we hired from down in Hialeah. I believe it was Chief Bates. He came up and he asked me. He said, "Would you mind doing the AAR or the debrief?" And I said, "Chief, I said I don't mind doing it." I said, "But just so you know, I mean, everything's going to be brought to light here. Like, I'm not holding back on anybody, including myself, but everybody's going to know, because everybody needs to learn." I just believe that, and we teach it all the time, but do we carry it out all the time? And this is a time it needs to be carried out. Real headstrong battalion chief, for those of you who don't know, but a good guy, and a guy who really does have heart, even though people never get to see it. He stepped up and he said, I'm gonna own that one. And again, another proud moment, because some people don't want to do that. And if you know this guy, you would say that guy would never do that, but he did. He stepped up and he said, "I'm going to own that. Yeah, it's on me." I didn't allow for Division III to give me everybody's off the deck. Talked about the truck lieutenant, after being a truck lieutenant for so long, and I told him, I said, "Listen, man, you're called special ops for a reason. And I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but we're not special ed, we're special ops. It's your job, before you throw 800 gallons a minute up there, to clarify. I don't care, again, if it's the President of the United States. You go, I'm not opening that nozzle. Everybody's off that deck. Because this is the kind of stuff that happens. This is the kind of stuff we read about." And everybody took it well. Dave, again, Chief Bates, he said a lot of good things about me. And again, a guy I didn't know super well. I got to know him a little bit, and again, I kind of walked away going, man, I don't get it. I don't get why people are saying these things, because I just didn't do anything different. I think people feel like they got to do something different to try to earn that. And I think that's where they go wrong. They steer it in the wrong direction. And again, I leave there all humbled again, thinking, man, I don't get it. Why do you get credit for just being proud of a good job? And I think you and I can agree that we've lost a lot of that. We've got guys that walk away and don't mind if they didn't do a good job.
Yeah.
We talk about our after action reviews and how you leave on a positive note, right? And you sat through many of my classes. Sorry about that too, by the way, but you sat down and listened to me a lot. And I would tell them, positive, there's positive and a lot of negative. Positive to me is you showed up and one bedroom was on fire and you're standing out there and there's a slab there and you're telling everybody nobody got hurt, good job, everybody go home. I said, that's not a positive note. Positive note is we're going to be better when we leave here than when we came. And there is nothing you can tell me that makes that right. That this was a single, this was just a room and content fire that we allowed the entire structure to burn down. We failed in a lot of areas. That's the negative. The positive is that we're not going to do it again. So
Right.
That's leaving on a positive note, not saying, well, nobody got hurt. We'll all go home. Well, sorry about those people. That's not positive. So that's what we mean when we say we leave on a positive note. So anyway, again, I guess it's just a train of thought or a frame of mind. So that's kind of it. That's kind of the way that night went. Still suffering from it today. Wake up every night, probably between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning with my neck and my shoulder just in excruciating pain. And for everybody out there, man, you need to report it, because I didn't. I just took it as getting older, up all night, dehydrated. I ran 30 calls and it'll go away, and it hasn't gone away. And I know exactly where it came from. So if anybody listens to it, don't saying, hey, I woke up with some stiffness. It's okay to at least get it documented. For me, I'm just got the same shitty insurance, and it is what it is. So
that night when the roof came in, that was one of those moments where, I mean, when I left that scene, I swore to myself that would never happen again. I mean, I thought you and 2 firefighters died.
Well, I did too for a short second.
You covered all the bases. That's why I wanted you to tell the story. Not sure if we talked about the reason why I titled the podcast From Embers to Excellence. The thought behind that is it came to me as I've made a lot of mistakes in my personal and my professional life. One of the things that I've been determined to do is not allow those mistakes to define me, but to make sure that I learn from them and help others learn from them as well. Just make sure that I'm better, that something positive comes out of those mistakes, those failures. And if you'd be willing to share, maybe some defining moment in your personal or professional life where at that time you felt like it was a failure, and you learned a lot from it, and it helped shape who you are.
Gosh, I want to honestly say I probably made more bad choices than I did good choices. Or I shouldn't say choices, I should say decisions. Fortunate for me, they weren't critical bad decisions, and they weren't necessarily in the moment bad decisions, but after the fact, looking back on it, they weren't good decisions. From a fireman, being a fireman, to all the way up to being a lieutenant, being a teacher, being a dad. I think the reality of it is, like you were talking about, making mistakes. If there's anybody that can come on this podcast and say that they haven't done what you've done, haven't done what I've done, made mistakes in their life, and as I used to always say in all my classes was, it's the mistake has been made. It's not the mistake you make. It's what you do after you make the mistake. So what are you going to do? And I think that's what you mean when you say you're not going to be defined by it. You're going to show people that that mistake has actually pushed me forward to do better things, right? And
Right.
So I think all those mistakes that we made, that I've made, were just part of the process to getting to a point where I could share that in a positive way and say, man, I'm not standing here to tell you I don't make mistakes. I said, I'm going to make one today. There's no doubt. I've already probably made one today by coming on here. But I'm going to make one every day. But as I always talk about that, I say, do I want to make that mistake trying, or do I want to make that mistake because I didn't give an effort? And I'd much rather make that mistake by trying, learning from it, getting better from it, and not making it again. Now, if I continue to make the same mistake, obviously I'm not learning. But what a boring life. What a boring life it would be if none of us ever did. It always comes back to teaching some class. But I would tell the rookies, we had the slide up there that said, are you hesitant to ask questions? Do you feel like there's penalties for asking questions? Or would you point out a hazard to a more senior firefighter? And I would always put them as first day on the job, first hour into the job. And you're cruising around this house and you see something that looks like it's, man, that could probably hurt somebody. Are you going to allow that 1 hour on the job to keep you from telling that fireman the 15 years, at least pointing it out to them? And the ones that answered honestly would say, I don't think I would say anything. Right. And that's what we're trying to get out of. Right. I'll take the nickname. I'll take the razzing that I'm going to get if it was something silly. But then I would always follow it up with, okay, so you went on around, you didn't say anything about it, but the next year came through and somebody got hurt. Where are you now? Where are you now? Do you raise your hand and go, man, I saw that and I didn't tell anybody? That's the chances are it's going to be the same answer. No, I'm not going to say anything. But the bottom line is you're going to live with it. You got to live with that because it was something that you allowed your pride, right? You allowed that, well, man, I only got an hour on the job. It doesn't matter if you got an hour on the job. If you think it's bad, let them tell you why it's not. Let them explain to you. And I said, yeah, I'm going to tell you. I said, probably 50% of the time, they're going to turn around and look at you and go, man, good job. I didn't even see that. Because we get so focused on what we do and we get in such a routine that, I'm getting to Seaside, man. I'm kind of skipping that A and B to get back there. And I'm going to run past stuff. That's why we work in pairs. That's why two sets of eyes are better than one. You asked me about defining mistakes in my career. There was a bunch. I mean, there was a lot of things that I did in my career that weren't mistakes that I would have, because I was doing it for the right reason. I knew that it was something that was not in the handbook. Let's put it that way. But I always felt like a decision that I made, I never worried about a decision I made, what the punishment for making the decision was, if that makes sense. That never, ever crossed my mind. Every decision I ever made was made in the best interest of the people we were serving and the people that were with me. And so sometimes it was off script. Sometimes it was outside the handbook, but it led to a positive outcome. I've never had, I would say, a negative outcome. I would say probably I got to go all the way back to the story I told about when I first came on. I would say that was my defining moment. Was getting past that proudful state, getting past that, reaching out to somebody and saying, man, I don't know how to handle this. Like I've never been through it. I would say that was my defining moment, was getting through that year, fighting it. Some days, man, just not wanting to go inside, but not wanting to go on the outside, and just keep plugging away until it just became less and less. And for me, I think that was kind of my defining moment, was that you're doing what you're supposed to do. I'm a man of faith, and I just believe that, the good Lord wasn't going to let me walk away from that. And, he put me there for a reason, but he wasn't going to make it easy on me. He challenges us every day in life. And I believe that. And I think that's what makes us be better people. I mean, the society that we live in now, man, who would ever thought? I couldn't have imagined it. And I don't think anybody still can imagine it, that we are to where we are in our own country, in our world. So for me, I think I would have to say, and I don't know if you call it a mistake so much as being a little naive maybe, or just being too proudful to say, hey man, I'm just not feeling right, man. I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know how to overcome this. And getting some help. And when I say getting some help, it was, it was my parents, my wife, my in-laws, my lieutenant, again, Marvin, he meant the world to me. He still does. I mean, that guy. I mean, he let me know that it was okay, and that's kind of the message I tried to send to all these rookies, and these families that, hey, they're going to go through things that their body's not going to feel right. Their mind's not going to feel right. They're going to experience things. And what I wanted them to know was that that guy you eat dinner with every night probably went through the same thing, grab that guy and say, hey man, this was my first big call. How did you feel on your first big call? If they're going to be honest with you, they're going to say, man, yeah, I was feeling like this, feeling like that. And all of a sudden you start realizing that this is almost normal. You're not different than anybody else. It's just they have reached that point where I finally did. So to me, that's the defining part in my career, was that, you come out of that mentally tougher, period. And there's two choices to make, and I made the positive one, and I just kept pushing on. And so call it a mistake, maybe. I don't know if probably was a mistake, I guess, for not letting somebody know.
Yeah.
But I made plenty. Probably made one my last day on duty. I'm sure I did. We went and ate pizza. That wasn't good. That hurt me at the end of the day. But yeah, I've made some. I don't know that they defined me one way or the other, but I've made plenty. Still going to make them. I think that's what makes us better, though. Knowing it's going to happen. But much rather make them trying than sitting on the sideline.
Absolutely. So is there anything that you want to leave the audience with? Some nuggets of Alligood wisdom?
Well, yeah, there is actually. First of all, I know it's cliche to say that you're in the best profession there is in the world, but I used to tell people it wasn't because I am one, it's just because it became that way. I truly do feel that y'all serve, and the men and women serving out there, it'll be the most positive thing you've ever done in your life. You're not going to get rich on it by any means. Some are, but those aren't the ones out doing it. But I'd say be true to yourself, because if you can't be honest with yourself, and this is in your daily life, this isn't just in your service career, but if you can't be true to yourself, then it's never going to work out for you. You're never going to be looked upon the way you want to be looked upon. If you're not willing to step up and make the mistakes and admit to making the mistakes. Again, don't let emotion run your decision-making process. Again, if you got to take a day, and on that, I meant to go back to the email. So you know about this. This is when we were getting to know each other pretty well, and I got hot under the collar. Man, I typed out an email one night, and man, we've all done it. We've hit that send button and realized that at the end it's probably ain't going to work out so good. And boy, I got hot, man. I was mad, and I don't know what it was, but something said, call Dave. Call Dave and send this email over to Dave before you hit the send button. And so I did. I called you. I sent it to you, and you called me back, and you said, yeah, I probably wouldn't send that one. If we could all learn that, right? Not just on an email, but just in general, if we could keep emotion out of it and care about the person that's next to you. I don't care what color they are. I don't care what sex they are. You got to care about the person that's next to you. I'm not telling you got to go have a beer with them, because there was many I wouldn't have. But as long as they were next to me and we were in it together, they were the most important thing to me. And I think that the men and women in the field need to know that that is the most important thing. Leave your differences aside. When you're out there doing the job, especially in those high stress situations, the most important thing to you is the ones you're standing there next to. Because those people are the ones, along with yourself, that are going to get you back to the people that you love the most. And that's your family. So I would say start investing in yourself and others for the right reason. Not because it's a pay raise, and not because it's a bugle or it's going to get you out of doing more work or whatever the case may be, but because you're true to yourself and you want to make a difference. I think that's probably what I want to leave. And retirement's awesome to let everybody know. I hear people moan and groan, even grown men break into tears because they retired. If you do it right and you go out the right way, I'm telling you, it's that is your goal, is to get to that point. So for me, it's been a godsend.
Thank you very much for coming on and sharing everything that you did. This is probably one of the best conversations I've ever had with you. And we've had some.
It gets better.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've had some really good conversations. But as far as on a serious note, as far as those serious conversations that you and I have had, this is, I'd say, right up there, the top of the list. So I'm taking a lot away from this, and I really appreciate it, man.
No worries. Always here for you.
Thanks, man.
All right, brother.
Thank you for listening to this episode of From Embers to Excellence. Please visit hallenbachleadership.com for additional content. Dave's goal is to add value to as many people as possible. So if he can be of any assistance to you or someone you know, please connect with him via email or on one of his social media accounts, linked on the homepage of his website. Remember, our failures don't define us unless we let them. And the only true measure of a leader is the success of their team.